Hello, everyone. Wishing you all a wonderful afternoon. I'm Vihanga Gunadasa, and I'll present you a bit about my PhD project on ecological forecasts of fauna species response to fire, drought, and heat waves, and supervised by Professor Glenda Wardle, Professor Robert Korn, and Dr. Aaron Greenville. If you remember, last year, there was a rat plague that spread to Queensland, and that boom was because of higher food production that was triggered by heavy rainfall. And a few years ago, because of high bushfire, many mice died. And that was not only because of fire, but also because of the temperature that rose in the nearby areas. So it's evident that environmental factors drive the dynamics of population abundance. So why do we need to forecast? First, to support in decision making, because then we can anticipate and prepare for increased or decreased variability in populations, and also to achieve sustainable development goals. And next is to understand how nature works. For example, how do the species react to different environmental conditions? And why do we observe rapid increase or decrease in their abundances? What factors are affecting? So to answer all these questions, we need to forecast. We know that population abundance data are time series, and we understand that the numbers of individuals will change over time and vary according to where the species live due to resources, predators, and habitats. Therefore, we can model the individual abundance over different populations spatially, but when doing so, we need to keep in mind that the response of each species to changing environmental conditions is different. Therefore, prior to attend into forecasting the abundances, we first need to understand the system. To do that, what type of data do we need? First, we need a long time series data set, observations collected across many sites to accompany the spatial structure, then multiple species that contrast in their dynamics so that we can observe their behavior for different environmental conditions. Right, so when analyzing actual field collected data, we come across different types of uncertainties. With ecological time series data, we come across two types. First is the observation error that occurs due to sampling techniques. This is the difference between the true value and the observed value. Next is the process error that occurs due to environmental variability, and it is the difference between the expected value and the actual value. Apart from these, the other issue is the missing observations that occur due to logistical and financial constraints. Therefore, ecologists have used multivariate autoregressive state space models to address these issues. The reason is that it has a process equation that models the true population abundance at that current time point, making use of the previous abundance, the species interactions, and potential covariates in the environment. Here, WT represents the process error. And also, it has an observation equation that models the observed population abundance as a function of the true population abundance. And VT here is the observation error. So to explore the time series modeling in depth, we use a case study conducted by the Desert Ecology Research Group at the University of Sydney. Based on their long-term field surveys, they modeled the abundance of 5 different small mammal species, rodents and dasyurids, collected at 9 different sites, spatially separated sites in the Simpson Desert, using over 20 years of annual data. They built a Bayesian mass model to make inferences on population abundance. So here there's a small point to consider, which is the data collection. The start of the data collection at different sites was different because of the spatial spread. And when they are at the desert, they have been unable to collect data at some sites due to environmental conditions. That means we do have missing values in our data set. Right, so when exploring the time series modeling, I understood that certain restrictions have been applied to the assumptions of this B, the density dependence, the Q, the process error variance, and the R, observation error variance. So my first task was to evaluate alternative ecological assumptions. So on the right panel, on the green panel, you see how we have relaxed or open up the assumptions from the original assumptions or the original simplified assumptions used in the case study. So to do this evaluation rigorously, I wanted to make sure that my data are prepped up. And as I said before, we understood that the missing values are required to be addressed. So for that, I used 4 different imputation methods, 3 single imputation methods, the mean, moving average, and the Kalman filter, starting from the very basic that anyone would start off with to impute the missing values. And then a multiple imputation method, which is the multivariate imputation by chained equations, commonly known as MICE. So reminding us that missing values can occur as runs at the beginning or at the end or at different time points in the time series. We wanted to figure out how the quality of data would interact with different imputation methods. So to make this more sound, we simulated data to have similar qualities with that of the original ecological data, but we had the control to have different time series lengths and have different number of missing values. So we tested it for 4 different time series lengths. And upon selecting the most appropriate time series length, we tested out the 4 different missing value imputation methods. And this imputation process was done on a cumulative basis. How did this process happen? Right, so if you look at the x-axis, wherever you see that blue lines are there as a column, that's where the missing values occur in the time series. So for example, 8, 9, 10, those time points are missing in the data set. So if you look at 12, you see blue boxes have been shaded for 8, 9, 10, and 12. That means when you're going to impute the 12th position in your time series, already 8, 9, 10 are missing as well. So as we add up more and more missing values, we cumulative impute so that we can see the impact as more and more missing values are prevalent in the data set. How will the methods work? Right. So first we compute the error between the imputation and the original simulated value. And here there's no clear cut or clear win in our imputation methods. But we see that the uncertainties in the error differences tend to decrease as more and more missing values are introduced into the data set. But if you really want to pick one particular method, and if you're interested in only just to compare the error difference, and if you have fewer missing values in the initial part of your data set, mice tend to work better. And as you add up more and more missing values, or if there are more and more missing values in your data set, Kalman filter tends to work better. But using any of the methods wouldn't give you a huge difference. And then we moved on to modeling and predicting. So we first imputed the missing values, fitted a model, and then predicted. And then we tested the error between the prediction with the true value. So if you look at the 4 different methods, let's leave the ash one aside a bit, but look into the four colored methods. So you don't see a huge difference. So there's no clear win here as well. But clearly, so this ash one, the a priori, is that when you delete the missing values and just use whatever you have in your data set and then model and then predict. So that's what we would do most of the time. But that is not a clear option at all. Regardless of the number of missing values you have or where the missing values are placed in your data set. So we found out that none of the imputation methods perform superior to one another. Then why would we bother to impute? Let's leave that question aside. And what if we do not impute the missing values? We would eventually substitute it with 0 because we need to have discrete time points. So if you substitute with a 0, it does not account for the trends. And that's going to be a huge issue for ecological scenario. Or the other option is if we can delete the missing values. And this is going to create another problem, which is it's going to shorten the time series. So should we impute missing values? I think I'll leave that question out to you to think for your applications and then move on to my way forward in my research. So the Data Ecology Research Group has been collecting data since 1990 and is still collecting data. So I have very new data collected as well. So I'm hoping to use all of that data and transition from discrete to continuous time space model. Then using those models to generate forecasts of abundances and quantify the uncertainty. And then we all know that as new data is fed into model, we tend to get better forecasts and reduce the uncertainty. So then my final ultimate goal is to build a near-term iterative forecasting framework to produce better forecasts of population abundance and support in decision making. And that sums up my presentation. Thank you so much. And I would like to acknowledge all these institutions for all the support. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer now.